Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today, we are recording on a Monday, primarily because it's been a very hectic weekend, including my finishing of Star Wars Outlaws, the game I've been playing on Peralta's Place, but also because this week I wanted to discuss The Rings of Power, and with that, dropping 3 episodes over an hour each. It took a little bit of time to get through on top of everything else I was doing. So yeah, we're a little bit late on last week's episode. But I wanted to kind of still bring you guys some of a little bit of an understanding of what I felt about the project. And yeah, I've got to be honest. First off, the thing I think is most important to talk about is this three part release. I do think that's quite a lot to release on a first go around, especially when the episodes are so long. You know, when there's shows that drop that are 45 minutes per episode and it's a 6 episode season or an 8 episode season, you kind of get that why they might drop it all at once. I think 3 episodes when you've got an hour and 15 minutes for the first episode and sort of similar for the next few it is quite a lot to drop on people all at once. Now, of course, some people aren't like me who are trying to record this video. They're kind of they have a little bit more how to put it. They will have more time. They'll do it throughout a week, right? Especially because the next episode won't drop until a week's time. So I get that I'm not the kind of the typical person there trying to appease here, but I do think it's quite a lot to drop all at once, and I do think some people will either go, I'll wait till it's all out, or go, that's like too much to kind of invest in straight away. I don't know, that's my personal opinion on that. I also do think that thematically, when I was watching the episodes, when I was watched episode 1 and episode 2, I didn't quite get why they dropped these episodes all together. Episode 3 kind of changed my opinion on that because you are starting to really get, like, each episode focuses on one of the elements of the story from previous and brings it up to speed for where we're at currently. So I get that the first 3 episodes were a reintroduction to everything that's been going on in the world of Middle Earth, and yeah, I get it. I get it. I don't think it was my favorite version of what could have been done. I think I would have personally preferred it just to drop weekly. For me, in all honesty, but from a story perspective, I do get it. I do understand where they're coming from with that. Speaking of story, I do think that these first 3 episodes managed to do a good bit of work in kind of re-establishing the setting that we're in, re-establishing the kind of stakes, especially with that first 20 minutes dedicated to Sauron and what Sauron was doing prior to the actual show beginning. So prior to season 1 and kind of his where we first meet Halbrand in season 1 as well, kind of giving us an understanding of what that looks like. And otherwise, again, just kind of really establishing where everything's going forward. I will say that for me, I haven't read the books prior to this, and I haven't got such a deep understanding of this period of Lord of the Rings lore. So I am kind of sort of picking this up as I go along, reacting to the show and reacting to the lore that I'm given, not necessarily what has gone prior. So I understand that this might not be the review for everyone. It might not be the review for like anyone who might be like I don't know if this is the word, but like a Tolkien head or like a Lord of the Rings head, like anyone who knows more about that kind of anyone who loves this world. I might not be the best review for you because I'm looking at this from a standpoint of like I've watched the Lord of the Rings movies, I've watched the Hobbit movies, I've watched the first season of the Rings of Power, and I'm vaguely aware of like some extra lore, either by reading like a Wikipedia article or from tangentially hearing things from friends, etc. Like last season when we first, the first season of the show, sorry, when we first discussed Rings of Power, there was a lot of stuff I learned then about this kind of era. So I will say that there's kind of I'm not wholly uneducated on Lord of the Rings, but I'm not like your best person for it. So I am reacting largely on what I see on screen. And I think that's important to say because I think it's very important to own up to what you know about the franchise prior to discussing it, because there's certain things that like I think certain people might miss about certain, like for example, I've had people who tried to analyze Star Wars, but don't see it in the context of the bigger picture. And that's not to say that all things are true like that. But for example, I remember when I watched Solo the first time, a friend of mine hadn't watched a majority of Star Wars at the time, but had watched Solo and didn't quite get Solo. But Solo is a movie that, and I know a lot of people might say that they don't love it, but it is a movie that is largely based within the context of other Star Wars movies. It's not your Empire Strikes Back. Um, it's not your episode one. It, like Rogue One and Solo both fit in this thing, this realm of like, here he's a story, a movie that you need to have context for, and I think that's very very true of many franchises. Now, I think it's important to let people know that you might not have that context when you're kind of reviewing a show, so to speak. So, yeah, I am actually really enjoying the show. I think the fraught relationship between Elrond and Galadriel this season is really interesting compared to where they were last season, which was very much supportive and on board with each other. I think the relationship between Sauron as Anatar and Celebrimbor is really interesting as well. The dwarf storyline I find to be less interesting, so to speak, as well. Say the same with the stranger and the Halffoot storyline. They aren't super gripping to me, but I'm still interested to see where they go, especially with Rune coming into the picture as regards the stranger and seeing what's going on there with the is it Istar? I think it's Istar, right? I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names or anything. But yeah, I think this show is such, despite what you might think about how it treats the law and what's different about the law, etc. I think this show is very meticulous in terms of its plot and trying to allow a lot of different stories to weave together. And the like, kind of going back to what I was saying before, the fact that this is like 3 episodes that really do take into account. You have 3 episodes, but you don't have just 3 storylines. I think across all of these episodes, you have maybe about like I'd say about 4 main storylines, and then like I'd say another 2 of those split off into 2 like smaller ones, or sort of akin to that. Like, there's a lot of different characters moving in this show, and a lot of different pieces moving. And if you're not cerebral in your approach to this show, I think you will lose some of the understanding of what's going on. But I think the acting is also on point. I think I think there's certain scenes in this that really you like, especially Sauron. I forget the actor who's playing Sauron in this, but the way the actor for Halbrand slash Anatar slash Sauron manages to really, like, at certain points you forget that. And you know what it really reminds me of? Actually, it really reminds me of Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine. And obviously, like, these are different franchises and very different in terms of their approach to a lot of different things. I do find that kind of creeping entity who is causing all of these things to happen from the shadows is a really interesting one, and I find that Sauron is doing that in such a kind of underhanded, insidious way, very similar to Darth Sidious. And it's kind of interesting to see that play out. It's almost how I would expect if they did do a young Darth Sidious slash Palpatine show, how that would go. Him manipulating all these different people and them not even seeing what they're doing, or even if they do see what they're doing, they still fall for it anyway. It really reminds me of that episode of The Bad Batch where Palpatine maneuvers Senator Chuchi into petitioning a bill against for the clones, and it all ends up basically with the clones being decommissioned in favor of a new Imperial army that to stabilize the galaxy. And yeah, it feels very like that. It feels like Galadriel's been turned against Elrond, the dwarves against each other, all for the greater good of Sauron, which is essentially the idea. Sauron wants to come out on top, and I like the way they're doing that. I like the way they're kind of suggesting the slow rise to power, and that all these things are just slightly off and slightly going wrong, and like not to the end of like each individual storyline, but because everything's messing up at the same time, it's all going to start to come to fruition with, of course, the creation of more rings and Sauron's plan thereafter for that. And yeah, I think this show does a really good job of trying to feed you that in a way that is both. It doesn't. it doesn't doubt your intelligence, it doesn't handhold you, but at the same time, it knows that it needs to like not overcomplicate things all at once. And so that I do again go back and forth on the question of 3 episodes to start with, but I do think that you need that 3 hours to let people digest that story. I just wouldn't have released it all at the same time, in my opinion. Otherwise, I think the show looks really good as well. I think I know obviously there'll be a lot of CGI used in this, but I think it looks relatively well done. I think when not using CGI, the characters look really strong as well. The one thing I will say is that the elves, as prior, do look a little bit weird, and it was pointed out to me once, and I'll never unsee it. The fact that they don't have sideburns really throws me off. I know it's such a very small thing, but the Master Smith in this episode, Master, uh, is it starts with a C. He had like longer hair, and so you couldn't quite see his sideburns, so to speak. And because of that, I actually think I totally bought him as an elf, similar with Anatar actually. And then the Gilgalad and Elrond, the way their hair is, it puts me off. Like I understand it, I get it, but it stresses me out. It stresses me out. And I think oh, what's the word? I think there was better designs to go with for the elves, especially. It's funny because Galadriel, again, totally opposite. Galadriel looks fine, but it's just some of the male elves do look slightly off. Um, Otherwise, I think the world looks great. Really, they even managed to make, and this is something I find very hard for most um fiction worlds, fictional settings to do well, is make a desert area like desert plain, I guess the word, look good. And they did that with Rune quite well, in my opinion. They made it look really intriguing. I want to know what's going on there. Even despite that being one of the lesser storylines, in my opinion, I'm still really interested in what's going on there. It's very different for Lord of the Rings as well. I think that's why it's kind of appealing in its own way. A lot of the Rings, you think like forests, and you think Mordor, like this wasteland, yes, but like this dark, destitute, volcanic wasteland. So seeing a very different kind of almost more arid location is quite interesting as a set piece for Lord of the Rings, especially. Like, for example, you look at something like Dune, and that's all it's ever seen. So if you were to go somewhere different in Dune, like those scenes where you see them on Caledon, Caledon, the forest planet that the Atreides come from, you think, oh right, okay, like it like changes the perspective of that that medium, that franchise, that story, so to speak. So yeah, I think in that way, very intriguing too. But yeah, I think this show is one where you either love it, you hate it. But I think you could appreciate the kind of the craft put into it. Of course, this has been like, I think it's been something akin to 2 years since the first season came out, and now we're on season 2, and obviously, like it's sort of like they're taking their time with this show. In my opinion, it doesn't feel like they're pushing it out before it's ready, so to speak. And I feel like that is what is the success of this show, as regards, even if maybe it doesn't hit the story beats well, I think it's a well crafted show, from the acting to the visual appearance of the show to the story that they're telling. Even if it's not a story that everyone would like, it's a story that I think is quite well done. And again, I'm talking in a general sense because I know that some people didn't quite like how this show started to come about. I'm not saying necessarily that um I know that this is in what's the word, is derivative of Tolkien's media in that way. I'm just saying that I know that some people might think that. I think that's important to say. I'm going to leave it there largely because I think we've still got a lot to see about this show. I think really these first 3 episodes are introductory at best and don't really dig too deep into the plot. Besides giving some really amazing set pieces and giving some really interesting kind of cerebral moments, and kind of like let us get that insidious kind of Sauron feel going on, so to speak. but yeah, so hopefully, I would like to. I depends on what drops in the meantime, but I would like to kind of revisit this show when season 2 is wrapped and see how I feel about it then. But in the meantime, yeah, I actually really did enjoy it so far, and it was a nice viewing to watch. It was nice to sit and watch some TV for a change, and kind of not stress about what I'm doing next. It was just to watch a show that was relatively well crafted and relatively well put together, and yeah. Um, if you guys disagree or you agree or whatever, let me know. As always, and yeah, thank you guys for watching slash listening to this special delayed edition, Monday edition of For What It's Nerd. We'll be back next week discussing I don't know what yet, so that's exciting. I will see you guys then. Oh, we also have in a few weeks' time Agatha All Along coming up as well. So our next Marvel show is on the docket as well. So keep an eye out for that as well. Until then, guys, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.